It's time for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast, answering your questions from the General's quarters every week, right here on Volquest.
Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast, presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store, focusing on natural products, organic remedies. That is Smoky Mountain Organics. Check them out online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com, or visit in-store one of their 4 locations, 3 in Sevier County, 1 in Knoxville, on Kingston Pike, just down near Barnes & Noble, across the street there, where the Trader Joe's and that shopping center is. And then they have their store in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, and Sevierville. That is Smoky Mountain Organics. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I am Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this mailbag edition. Plenty of questions to get to as always, and we'll jump right in with a couple of recruiting questions right out of the gate. Austin, what does the linebacker board look like for the 23 class? Updates on Grant Godfrey and Grayson Howard.
Godfrey, someone Tennessee likes a good amount. Grayson Howard, Tennessee loves, and I would put him right up there at the top. I mean, you got to think like Caleb Herring's going to play, outside backer, but I mean, he's not an inside guy, but he's not Tyler Barron either. He's going to, be one of those guys that comes off the edge. Grayson Howard's right there at the top of the list. There's a handful of guys that Tennessee's really going after pretty hard. And I know in talking to some people on campus, including Brian Jean-Marie, the month of March is going to be big to try to get some of their top targets in here.
Yep, we'll see who comes into town for unofficial visits and what that looks like. Speaking of Caleb Herring, CD Vol wants to know, assuming Tennessee's the leader for Herring, which team would be running second right now to Caleb Herring?
It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to be like, it doesn't matter. I mean, like, Tennessee's going to get Caleb Herring. It's not, if, it's when. And, it's just a matter of, there's a process in all recruitments. And so that's kind of, we're just in those checking the boxes type stuff. But I mean, him and his brother are super, super, super tight. And, that one at this point to me is a foregone conclusion.
All right, let's go to a hoops question. Sam Smith, 2233. Does Jonas Aidoo have the highest ceiling of anyone on this roster? And who draws JD Note Saturday? And is this team capable of handling that environment? Let's start with the second one. Who gets that assignment on Note, and can Tennessee handle the new Barnhill Arena? I guess it's not new anymore, but can they handle Fayetteville, Rob?
Probably JJ. Josiah is probably the guy you match up with. But Tennessee switches everything. The guy doesn't end up, guarding the same dude 15 seconds into most possessions. But starting when they cross half court, most of the time, I think when he's on the floor, you'll see Josiah matched up with him. But again, Tennessee switches just about, certainly 1 through 4, sometimes 1 through 5, depending on what lineup the other guys are. I think Tennessee can handle the environment. I don't think the environment's going to overwhelm them. But I wrote it in the 3-2-1 and said it on our podcast earlier this week. I thought Tennessee would beat Kentucky and lose at Arkansas, and I still kind of lean that way. But it won't be because they're not mentally tough enough to play in there. It's just, I think if you watched the Auburn game last week, that place was a madhouse. I think it will be on Saturday, and that along with Thompsonville and Auburn and Rupp, I think are the best arenas in the league when they have something to cheer about.
Yeah. Nothing about Ziegler and Kennedy Chandler says they're going to get unnerved. Arkansas may just win because it's tough to win in there, and Tennessee may not shoot the ball as well as they've shot it here lately. I ultimately think Rob's right. At this point, and I think Rob will agree, after you won the Kentucky game, you're playing with house money going to Arkansas. If you were to sweep this week, that is such a monumental feat. So to me, they're playing with house money.
Yeah, and I won't be shocked if they win at all. They can play well to win. I just, if you put a gun to my head, I would pick Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas just played really well at home for the most part, and obviously they played terrific in that Auburn game. That nobody was going to beat them that night in that arena. But this is an Arkansas team that certainly got better. I think Jonas Aidoo is a fascinating story, Rob. I don't know about highest ceiling of anyone on the roster talk, But I think it's interesting where he's at right now, what he's given to Tennessee. How much of a surprise is that to you? And how much would we have seen Jonas if Olivier doesn't get hurt?
I can't answer that question. I mean, I would like to think that you would have seen him, but I don't know that that's accurate. But I don't care if people believe me or not. You would go in that gym in January and you wouldn't have known the difference whether Aidoo practiced that day or not. I mean, some people on the board, want to blame Rick, and, for putting him in mothballs and not playing him. I mean, that's just, again, I don't care what you think. That's just not true. I mean, the kid did not look like he did last night at any point in time if you walked in that gym from November through the end of January.
Don't you think too, Rob, a lot of that is he knew he wasn't going to play, so your engagement in practice, and then even if you get into some mop-up duty, it's just not there because you're not playing real minutes.
Totally. I mean, I think that when you go and play, when did Olivier get hurt? Last week at South Carolina? What was that, like?
Week and a half ago.
I'm trying to think. Was that maybe the 11th or 12th SEC game? And you haven't played yet? I mean, you're going to keep coming to practice every day and really absolutely, bang your head against the wall. But I mean, I think that's probably part of it, AP. But I think the bigger part was just missing just about, just about all the preseason in October, the first couple of weeks of practice in November. I mean, the kid was just so far behind, not only from a, what's the playbook? What do we do on, what's our defensive philosophy? Where's my help? All that kind of stuff, but just conditioning. I mean, when you miss that much time as a Division I athlete, and, basketball, football, track and field, soccer, whatever, I mean, you're going to be behind.
Does Tennessee fans, should they be cautious in that? I mean, obviously he was terrific against Kentucky, but that's not necessarily a mainstay week in, week out. And I say this, he's a very different player than Euros. He's much more talented ultimately than Euros. But there was a point in the stretch in the middle of January where Tennessee fans were thinking that Tennessee had figured it out in the post because what Euros was doing, what he was giving them from a toughness and grit standpoint. Is what Jonas did against Kentucky, Rob, is that a baseline? Is that a high water mark for where he's at right now? Do you think that he can consistently do what he did against Kentucky night in and night out?
I mean, I think he can do what he did in the paint around the rim night in and night out. Now, I don't know that he's going to grab 7 rebounds and, make his foul shots and all that every night. But I think if all you are asking him to do is protect the rim, I think he can do that. Now, is he going to know what to do against every offensive set that you're going to see because he's really, grinding in film session and knows the defense that well? Then no. I mean, I think there's going to be some nights where he looks lost. But if within 3 feet of the basket on defense, he can do that every night, I think.
How differently does it change a good defensive team if they've got a guy who can do that 3 feet
I mean,
from the basket?
If he's playing 18, 20 minutes a night, like he played 18 minutes last night, I think it changes things dramatically, hugely. I mean, you saw them. I mean, they held the best offensive team in the SEC to 63 points and 34% shooting. And I mean, he wasn't the only reason, but
and realistically, don't you? I always chalk those last 4 or 5 points up to like Tennessee's not really playing real defense. They're just trying to get it to the triple zeros. Like,
sure.
They're not getting in front of anybody. They're like, yeah, we'll give up the easy 2,
3-point play with a cheap foul.
Yeah.
I mean, wide open 3.
Much like, when Tennessee gets to like 77, go from 71 to 77 in the last 20 seconds on free throws, it's the same way. I mean, you're adding points that you really.
They very nearly held Kentucky in the 50s, which would have been an accomplishment.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they were terrific, and I mean, they've been good defensively consistently all year long, with the exception of the one game at Kentucky. I mean, if he can do in the paint if Aidoo can do in the paint what he did last night or against Kentucky, I mean, that turns a really good defense into potentially a really, really good defense. I mean, it allows them to even be more aggressive to me on the perimeter with all that they want to do because they've got rim protection behind him for straight line drives. So certainly something to watch for sure with this team moving forward in the postseason.
And just highest ceiling, I mean, people may not want to believe it, but I would still say Huntley Hatfield. I mean, his body is way different than Jonas. I mean, Huntley Hatfield, he's not even scratching the surface. I mean, it's not even, he's not even taking the wrapper off to start scratching the surface of what he could do. I mean, that kid could I mean, he really has a chance to be special. I mean, it might be 3 years, it might be 4 years, but the way he can make shots, just his strength, his versatility, I think he has the highest ceiling of anybody out there. Not to say a dude doesn't have a ton of potential, but I would, if you want to, make a bet on who's the better player in 5 years, I would take Brandon.
All right, let's go to the next one here. I know it's early, but who would you say is the most important defensive recruit Tennessee is in on Austin, not named Caleb Herring?
Big Burley.
Okay.
Big Burley. Just because you're in that one. Again, it's going to be a tussle against some really good teams, but you're in that one, heavily in that one. The kid loves Rodney. The family loves Rodney, which puts Tennessee right there in the dogfight amongst some really elite programs. So, that's why I go him. Otherwise, I go Christian Conyer because he's a super gettable kid out of Bowling Green, Kentucky that is got real talent. I think he is Emmanuel Mosley, except for when he gets to campus, he won't have to put on 30 pounds to get to underweight. So I mean, I think he's got that kind of ability to play in the NFL.
With Burley, is it Georgia or Georgia and Alabama?
Clemson as well. So I mean, Tennessee's in on some really solid players in this 23 class. Again, they just got to continue to get them to campus. Trayvon Webb's going to be here. On the 5th, the running back from Florida. Probably not going to get that kid, but again, you're getting over here for a junior day. You shoot your shot, you see where you're at coming out of it. If you don't feel like you're in it, you move on to somebody else, and there's no harm, no foul. But potentially, you show well, and you get in that one for a while. So,
yep, I would agree, Burley. I think, but again, that may be the toughest get of all the defensive guys that they're heavily in on, just because of the competition that you're going with. With the start of the season around the corner, does the baseball team have a chance to make a deep run in the tournament this year? I think they do. They've got to get healthy on the pitching side of things. Can they catch lightning in the bottle that they caught a year ago and win all those close games? We'll have to see. I think they're talented enough to certainly make a run. And it's about pitching, your best at the right time of the year. Peaking towards the end of the season is always your challenge, and we'll see where this team gets to at the end of the year.
Can some of those younger guys hold it together early to get Blade Tidwell back, and then all of a sudden they're not really, quote, freshmen anymore, and then he comes back? And because they do have, to me, some real firepower to be able to hit the ball. It's kind of the pitching staff, even though it's deep, it's still inexperienced and young.
Yep, and that'll be the question, particularly early on. They're going to take some lumps, I think, early, and we'll see how they grow from that and move from that. I don't know that this is going to be a team that starts as fast record-wise as they have the last 2 years. Here's the final question in this post is, which past UT quarterback are you taking to play for UT in the modern age of football? Is anybody saying anybody other than Hugh Schuler, Rob Lewis?
Give me the Sheriff in any era. I don't care. Think you couldn't win with Peyton?
Oh, absolutely you could. Absolutely. I think Peyton wins in any era of football. I think Hugh Schuler thrives better in this era of football than he would have in his previous era.
No question. I mean, he would have been special, but I'm not taking anybody but 16.
You're not taking anybody but the Hall of Famer? That's a pretty safe bet, right?
Well,
take the Hall of Famer.
Bernie Veazey. Bernie Veazey.
Bernie
right behind
Veazey.
him.
The pride of Mississippi, number 5, Bernie Veazey.
Would you take Bernie Veazey or Bo Hardigree in this current era of football? Go.
How about Bo Hardigree moving up the old coaching ranks in the National Football League? Congratulations to Bo Hardigree.
Next time the Tennessee job comes open, you can just see it. Bring Bo home.
Bring Bo home. That's exactly right. Reverend Blue Jeans, by the way, great screen name. In the time you've covered the Vols, who's been your favorite to interview, chat with, football and basketball wise? Present players excluded.
When they were here, I think there's a bunch of guys that I think appreciate the media more now than maybe when they went through. I really enjoyed chatting with Alvin when he was here. He was just a different kind of kid, man. I mean, he kind of embraced it. He would cut it up with you. Basketball wise, I've not been around that as much like Rob has, but there's still some quality kids over there in that basketball program that I think have good personality.
Now he said favorite to interview / chat with, and that's two separate things to me. Because there's some guys you enjoyed chatting with that you covered, but you didn't really like interviewing because they changed dramatically when they went into
Looking at you, Chris
process.
Lofton.
Yes. Look at you. Love Chris Lofton. Chris Lofton sitting in a chair, courtside shooting the breeze is very different than Chris Lofton with a microphone in his face.
And 3 cameras.
And 3 cameras in his face for sure.
Grant was great. Grant was pretty good on camera or off. And the Slay Dog was the Slay Dog was the same as a 22-year-old kid as he is, as a 40-year-old man, pretty much.
Camera, no camera, it didn't matter. He was always entertaining for sure.
And our boy Jason Swain was a good interview.
Swain was a good interview. Then you had some guys who were not necessarily the most high profile guys. I mean, I always enjoyed dealing with Wes Brown. I thought Wes Brown's just a fantastic individual to deal with. He was always gracious with his time, even after tough losses. And the feature I did on him for Senior Day is one of my favorite stories I've ever done, just because he was great to hang out and visit with and talk with. There've been a lot of good guys come through.
I think
like Eric Berry was nice to have conversations with. Not a lot of fun to interview. No offense, Eric, but that was not his forte. But he was a lot funner just to hang out and shoot the breeze with about something.
I think for any of us and any media that covers recruiting, it is different because the kids from their high school days and they know you. So there's a comfort level when kids come to campus having talked to Eric or Ben or me or Hubs or Rob or Ryan Callahan at 24/7 or any of those other people that cover recruiting than somebody that, I mean, no offense to David Oven, but he didn't know those kids when they got here. So they didn't know who David Oven was, or Blake Topmeyer, so I think anybody that's talked to the kids from when they were 16, 17, 18, the kids are more comfortable, especially to chat with, for any of us that have known them for several years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a familiar face, particularly if you've met them face to face somewhere. It's a comfort level for those guys, particularly when they get into a media scrum with a bunch of people they've never seen, for the first few times until they get comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, Hubs has heard me tell this story a billion times, but my philosophy on any of this is, there's a reason Rob goes to the Peach Jam or we go on the state tours, Hubs, because kids, when they see our face and realize this is an actual person and not just Charlie on the other end of the speaker box talking to the Angels, it just changes how kids view you, and it makes them more comfortable with you. So, yeah,
there's no question about that. For me, even though I never made it face to face, I mean, Kevin Simon for me was great to deal with on campus because we talked so much during the recruiting process that once he saw me face to face, I mean, it was an easy connection because we had visited so many times during the recruiting process. All right, E. Schaefer 92 wants to know, seems like over the past few years, Tennessee has finished either second or third for so many blue chippers. What will it take for Tennessee to finish the deal with big-time guys in 23 like Nico, Tate, and Burley? You got to win. You got the NIL factor, Austin. You got other teams' depth charts. There's a lot of variables about there. You just got to keep sledding away and banging away at it. I mean, I think Nico, NIL is going to be a bigger factor than NIL is going to be for Burley. I think relationships are probably going to be a little more factor for Burley ultimately when it's all said and done. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it feels like.
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and I see this on the board all the time, well, it just go matter who plays the most. Sometimes not. I think that's why you have to the coaches still carry a huge part in this. Very few kids are just going to go to a school because they offer the most opportunities in NIL. Like, what a kid's really looking for is someone they can trust, someone they have a good relationship with, and the big NIL package. I think that you look at several different factors in all of this. So you're right. I think winning, continuing the upward trajectory this year, not taking a step back, that goes a long way to landing the 3 he named. Building relationships, and then again, the NIL package. So to me, it's all encompassing. It's not just one thing. Like this whole notion that it's like, well, whoever pays the most is going to get them. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you have to also have a rapport with the kid. If the kid doesn't like you, it don't matter how much money you offer, as long as somebody else is competitive, the kid's going to go where he has the best relationships.
Yeah, because ultimately the money's going to get pretty close to
again, competitive. Can you get competitive?
It's not going to be a situation where somebody's got an astronomical deal at one place and no deal at the other if you're talking at the Power 5 level. Hey, fellas, what's going on with the spring game situation? Will we have one? If not, could you see them doing something for the fans later in the year? I am comfortable in saying that the spring game is not going to be in Nashville. It's not going to be played in Nashville, so I think Nashville is off the table. So what do? I don't know that Chattanooga is completely off the table. I'm not saying that it's trending that way, but that's at least been explored or is being explored. Could they do some kind of limited scrimmage? I don't know. They cannot do anything in Neyland Stadium. I do think they will probably do something for the fans at some point, whether it's around a spring game, a spring scrimmage, or whether it's later in the year. We'll have to see. But I think it's pretty clear at this point. There's no guarantee there's going to be a spring game. I am comfortable saying it's not going to be in Nashville, but I would not completely rule out Chattanooga, although that feels a bit like a long shot at this point on where things are.
I mean, Hubbard, wouldn't the same obstacles be there for Chattanooga? I mean, as far as having to pay for people to spend the night, or would they bust down there day of?
I mean, you could still have some of those similar obstacles. I mean, I think part of the issue with Nissan Stadium is there's some other stuff going on at Nissan Stadium at this point. With a bunch of other events coming up. They've got the outdoor hockey game later this month. A lot of stuff happening at that venue that could be challenging to add a football game into that venue, as well as trying to get a deal worked out there. Chattanooga might be a little simpler because it's just smaller, it's closer, et cetera. I would be surprised if there's something in Chattanooga, but again, I was told don't rule that one completely out. So we'll see what happens there. But you also can't rule out the fact that there may not be a spring game in its truest typical form this season as construction continues inside Neyland Stadium. So
Hubbard, if that's the case, will you be able to pick up the pieces and move on if there's no spring game?
Be a heck of a streak broken. I've got to have one of the longest streaks ever. 94.
It's going to leave a big hole in your. Big hole in your heart.
Right.
I was contemplating not showing up with it being Masters Saturday anyway. So
moving day.
Hey, Austin was in like the third grade when I covered my first spring game or something to that effect, right? 94. What were you? Were you middle school?
No, I would have been sixth grade.
Yes, sir.
He was still playing with a junior set that just had a 3, a 5, a 7, and a 9 iron.
That's exactly right. That's what he was playing golf with while I was covering the 94 spring
two persimmon head woods, a driver and a 3-wood.
The old Sam Snead persimmon head.
Only had a clinch view pullover in his collection.
That's right. There had been no such.
This is true. There was none of this
Peter Millar at that point.
I had no clue what Peter Millar was in '94.
All right, Borough Boys 615. Austin, you mentioned that Nico might be close to signing a deal with Spryer in the previous podcast War Room. If he were to sign the deal, is that something that they would announce, or would that be kept under the radar until Nico got to campus? Not asking for figures, but what does an NIL deal look like for a high school kid across the country in states where that's allowed?
Yeah. So I don't think you'll see it announced if they came to an agreement beforehand. And no, I don't. I think you're looking at, for a quarterback in one of those type states, I think you're looking at 7 figures.
Whew, crazy.
For the high school season, that doesn't count when you arrive on campus.
That's
which is a risky proposition.
Yeah, because there's no guarantee the kid signs with you. He can change his mind.
There you go. And that's what makes Nico so risky.
Yep.
But Nico's also a freak. So with great risk comes great reward if you were to land it.
Yeah, we'll see. Thoughts on the scrum on the UK bench on Tuesday night, Rob? And will the SEC or UK assess any kind of punishment to their strength and conditioning coach?
I mean, they should. I mean, I haven't seen a great video of it, but there's too many people. I mean, when Rick Barnes comes out and says, their trainer shoved Zakai, then I'll take that to the bank that it happened. And I think it's ludicrous. I mean, you got to punish the guy. I mean, what if, some Kentucky player runs out of bounds in football, and a member of Tennessee strength and conditioning staff shoves him. I mean, all hell is going to break loose. I mean, it's maybe not Woody Hayes, but I mean, you're in the same zip code. I mean, I think it's I think it's pretty egregious that a paid professional laid hands on a kid, even if it was something minor. And maybe Kentucky is spinning it like, he was trying to get Zakai away from their players, but I think it was pretty clear Zakai was running over there to help Volquest up, like Tennessee's players do every single time one of their teammates hits the floor. I mean, I thought it was just straight garbage.
We'll see if the SEC does anything. I'm going to
like
guess
Rick
no, but
I mean,
Rick
said after the game last night, why? I mean, hey, Doug Shows, I'm going to have my trainers start getting into it with a player every game. If it's a personal foul on him and just a team foul on us.
Yeah, I mean, it's again offsetting technicals, but it still counted as a personal foul against Ziegler, which is different than offsetting. It's not really offsetting technicals.
No, I mean, it got Tennessee one foul closer to the bonus, but say a guy picks up a third foul the first 2 minutes coming out of halftime.
Yeah,
that changes the game.
Yeah, dramatically.
I thought Carl Ravitch was atrocious last night. I mean, arguing that there was a foul, then Jimmy Dykes had to correct him, and then at one point he talked about Urosh with quick hands, and it was not even Urosh had his hands straight up, and it was the off-ball defender that had smacked the ball away. I mean, it was bad. Again, we all have our moments, but I thought he was particularly blue slanted last night.
How was Jimmy Dykes? Because he loves the balls.
I think Jimmy Dykes was very fair.
He was fair, but he loves Rick. He likes Rick and he likes the Vols. But he had a good night last night. I thought I didn't think that he overanalyzed the game. I thought he let the game environment shine through, and but I thought he pointed out some good things as well. I enjoyed his call last night. I thought.
How did the crowd come through on television?
Good. Yeah, I mean,
it was.
Here's the thing about that the crowd came through on TV very well, Rob. The other thing and you mentioned this in a tweet, that's the least amount of blue I can ever remember seeing in Thompson Bowling Arena in recent years. I know that's been a conscious effort to prevent that from the takeover. That's the least on TV. That's the least amount of blue I've ever seen.
Don't you think the 9 o'clock helps that though?
No, they're not.
Now, those people they travel everywhere. I mean, and Tennessee fans just didn't sell it. They didn't sell off their tickets, and there was nothing for Kentucky people to gobble up. Did you not think it was the least amount of blue, Rob?
Totally. I mean, my memory is not fantastic. Maybe there's some years that were similar, but I mean, I was really impressed. It wasn't the blue mist would never materialize. It was more like a blue smattering.
The real question that needs to be answered is: did you spill your coffee last night on press row?
No spilled coffee.
Okay, good.
Kept it 100.
That's a good night then. Rob, how has the last month changed the perception of the ceiling of the basketball team for this year and next year? Even if Kennedy Chandler goes pro with Olivier returning, Jonas, the front court doesn't seem like such an Achilles moving forward. Seems like the Vols are positioned for success this year and next year as well, as much as anybody around the country. You believe that the perception of this team is different, but because of Jonas and kind of where they are with some guys?
Well, you need to get. I mean, I'm not trying to start a rumor. As far as I know, everybody's coming back right now. But kids leave all the time. I mean, if Brandon comes back, which as far as I know, that's happening right now. Aidoo comes back, then yes. I mean, I think the outlook is pretty strong. You get Olivier back. I think even with all that, I think Tennessee would like to get a big in the transfer portal. Would like to add some size. And with Kennedy, I mean, I just don't know. I mean, he was fantastic last night, but. I mean, I think he has all the potential in the world, but I just don't know that he's a slam dunk first round draft pick right now. I mean, maybe he is, but to me, it seems like a bit of a question mark. I mean, last year, I didn't know Keon was going to vertical jump 48 inches at the combine, but I knew he would go up there and get the certified freak stamp. And I thought, Jaden was a first rounder. I don't feel like it's a slam dunk with Kennedy. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe NBA scouts feel differently, but to me, I mean, if you get that kid back and, maybe he gets some kind of NIL package that makes it a little more attractive instead of taking his chances of being a second rounder, then I think Tennessee could be special next year.
And continued development of young players, and with what Ziegler's done, we'll see what Kennedy Chandler does. And other players that have come back, that it does look
And
like.
nobody talks about these kids. I think Meshack is going to be a good player, and I think Quentin DeBuche is going to be a good player. There are no minutes in that backcourt right now when you talk about the four guys in Ziegler, Kennedy, Josiah, and Santi that are getting all the work.
Is Quentin? I mean, I know Meshack's more like an athlete who can defend. Is Quentin a shooter?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would call him a pure shooter right now, but he's more of a scorer. He's way more smooth on offense than Meshack, way more.
All right, Pine Mountain Vol here as we get ready to get out the door. Quarterback recruiting seems to have changed more than any other positions with the portal and the transfer rule. I know the old school rule was to take a high school guy every year. Do you think that's the case anymore? If Tennessee strikes out on Nico Moore and Vins, do they look in the portal instead of high school for a player? Guys like Vandergrift, Stockton, Simpson, some of these other guys in very competitive situations.
There you go. That's that. I mean, that's what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks. I mean, like if you don't get Nico or Dante Moore or Christopher Vizina, then in my opinion, you're better off to go watch tape of Brock Vandergrift, Gunnar Stockton, anybody that potentially could bolt their current situation because they don't want to, be stuck setting the pine again. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I'm watching. If I'm Tennessee, that's the one thing I'm trying to do is, take a hard look at the portal, because I do think there's some real value there, than going unless you can get one of these top end high school kids.
All right, last question, promise, one for each of you. Is Jordan Phillips going to be a difference maker next year on the D line? We've heard nothing but positive things about him. Jordan will have 30-plus practices next season. That's a lot for a kid because he's going through spring and all that before the season starts. Where do you think Jordan Phillips is from a contributor next year, Austin?
Well, I think both he and Tyree West both will have a lot of practice time because they both were early enrollees. Do I think that they're going to play next year? Yes. Do I think they're going to have a huge factor next year? We'll see. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on how quickly they come and how much that Coach Garner can mold them and get out of them between now and the season.
And for you, Rob, will Tennessee finally beat Auburn if they can guard the three ball?
I mean, I'm not predicting. I'm not sure what I'm predicting in that game yet. I'm certainly not predicting it with any confidence, and that's not about Bruce versus Rick. I mean, that's about Tennessee versus Auburn. I think those two big guys inside are a tough matchup for not just for Tennessee, but for anybody. And Jabari Smith and Kessler. I mean, they will need They will need a night like they got last night from Aidoo.
Well, and
sure. Auburn. I mean, I don't think Auburn's guards are that great this year. Not like they have been.
No, not like they have been, but they're good enough and can score well enough that you can't pack it in around those big people.
Yep.
You got to come out. You got to come out and guard away from the basket. If they don't, then they're going to hurt you. Kentucky doesn't have a ton of people that can do that. You can pack it in a little bit, but again, if Tennessee has the ability against everybody to switch 1 through 5, that changes how good of a defensive team that they can be as well. And I thought that was a huge advantage last night, Rob, because I don't know if they switched that much in Rupp Arena. They may have, but I don't remember them switching like that. But they switched everything last night, and it really affected Kentucky.
Yeah, I think they were so worried, and again, I don't know what the percentage was versus the Kentucky game up there, but I think at the first game they were so worried about Sheway on the boards that really impacted like where they were going to switch, where they were going to give help, that kind of thing. I think last night they kind of just, played him pretty straight up. I mean, he got 15 rebounds, but it did not kill Tennessee.
No,
at all.
No.
I mean, I think they just kind of played how they would normally play, and didn't shift everything to him.
Yeah, well, it's certainly paid off. They were terrific last night.
Before we get out the door, we do want to wish a good luck this weekend to Eli Hubbs as he battles in sectionals with a chance to get back to the state wrestling tournament. If you want to see Brent in full rare form, just go to Halls High School Saturday all day long. He'll have his peanuts, and he'll be yelling at officials like he does every Friday night.
No, I don't yell at those officials because I don't know the rules well enough to yell at those officials to know
he looks like AP. You may not even remember. He looks like Shoot from Vision Quest.
Hey, that doesn't stop Mark Packer from criticizing the officials on Rivalry Thursday. He doesn't know the rules either. So,
by the way, I'll say this out the door. I don't generally talk about these things. The thread where people were congratulating me about my son was fantastic, and to the guy who posted that I use Eli Hubbs' ID to buy beer was one of the best threads we've seen.
It really was. It was great.
A long time. Hats off. Very creative, very good thread, and very good post there. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast every week right here on Volquest.